Welcome, everyone, and good evening to my distinguished guests and esteemed participants, and welcome to Africaness Research Team Roundtable discussion on the intersection of racial identity and the mental health of young people. We're having this roundtable discussion to mark today, the 10th of October, which is the World Mental Health Day as designed by the United Nations. And because of how important mental health of people in general, but especially the young people, are to the society. That's why we thought it would be something good and important to have this conversation and just rub our minds together and spark questions and conversations that will help us move our society and our communities forward. So I am Grace Okoro, the Research Director of Africaness, and today with members of the team, members of the panel who would be taking part in the roundtable discussion. We'll just be talking about how we can come together as a community to help our young people to navigate the complex terrain of racial identity and how that plays a very crucial role in the overall well-being of the young people and in the mental health of the young people. So because today is World Mental Health Day, it's important that we talk about what we know affects the mental health of young people. Obviously, there are several factors that affect the mental health of young people, but because we're coming from the Africaness point of view, and because Africaness is standing there as a community that help people to navigate racial identity crisis and how that affects the mental health of children and young people, that's why we're coming to consider this topic together. So before we go forward, I will like to just give a brief highlight of what our discussion today is going to be about. So, I mean, before we talk about racial identity, it will be important for us to understand the concept of racial identity or the concept of racial identity crisis, to understand mental health from a child and young person's perspective, or mental health in general, to also understand how this conversation can help us to empower the young people and to give them a voice to speak in spaces and places where their voices are not that heard. And hopefully we can suggest or offer practical solutions to several things or different problems or different challenges that young people face in their mental health as regards racial identity. I have a panel of esteemed experts here. They're experts, they're visionaries, they're change makers, and they've graciously agreed to join this roundtable discussion to just share their stories, share their journeys, provide insights, and just share their experiences from both personal angle and also from a professional angle as well. So over the next 60 minutes, hopefully, I'd encourage everyone to keep your mind open, keep your heart receptive, because there are conversations that would come up that would spark, thoughts in your hearts, that things that you've probably not thought about before. And I want us to keep our intentions focused on the future, because what we're talking about is young people. Young people are the future of every society. So I want us to keep our attention focused on the young people and how we can shape the minds of our young people. There are young people around us in our communities, young people in the places where we work, and we know that we're inviting them to be a part of this conversation because we believe that if they engage, or by engaging actively in these type of conversations, we have the power through this type of conversations and the solutions that will come out of them to kind of foster a community that would relate to people more with empathy, and a community that nurtures understanding of young people and their mental health, and will also help to cultivate an environment where every young person feels very confident and feel confident enough to thrive in that community. So before we delve into the nitty-gritty of the roundtable discussion today, I'll just call on each of the panel speakers to just briefly introduce themselves to us and tell us what they do and just tell us about themselves before we get into the discussion in detail. Wherever you're joining us from, just drop it in the comment section where you're joining us from, what country you're joining us from, and what area of the UK you're joining us from, or what area of the world, what part of the world you're joining us from. So over to you, Rashika. You're the first on my screen, so I'll just go by the order.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, Grace. My name is Rashika, and I'm joining today from Bristol. I am a multidisciplinary professional and I work across the teams of mental health and substance misuse. I'm also a writer, and I mostly write on the topics of mental health, addiction, recovery, and I'm very passionate about getting involved in charities. And I've been with Afrikindness for a couple of months now, and I'm very excited to see where this goes.
Thank you, Rashika. We're happy to have you here. Next on my screen is Dr. Babatunde.
Hi everyone. My name is Babatunde Pikala. I'm from Nottingham today. So I work for University of Nottingham as a research fellow, as a principal investigator. I lead a team of researchers at Nottingham. And yeah, so the focus of my research is to develop systems to kind of treat chronic diseases. Aside my research focus, I'm also involved in teaching. So basically, I'm also a lecturer at the University of Nottingham. So I've been part of Afrikindness for a couple of months now, and it's really been a great time. It's been a great pleasure being a part of this team, and I'm particularly seeing the great work this platform is doing, even in the life of the youth and everyone generally. So we're here to discuss an important topic tonight, and also glad to be here indeed. Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Dr. Vivian, you're next on my screen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Vivian Okoye. I am a psychologist, a researcher, and a well-being coach. My current role is at Nudge Education, where I work as part of their well-being team. Essentially, what we do is to provide alternative learning and education for children who struggle with mainstream education system, especially children who are struggling as a result of their mental health or social emotional needs. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good to have you here. Next on my screen is Dr. Maria. I think you're muted.
Hi, everyone. My name is Maria. I currently reside in Leeds. I'm a lecturer with the Elizabeth School of London, and I also have research responsibilities with Leeds Beckett University. My research focuses majorly on health promotion in the workplace, and I also have experience with research that has to do with placement experiences of students from nursing and social work background.
Good to have you here. Last but not the least on my list is Dr. Bukola.
Hi everyone, my name is Bukola. I work in child and adolescent psychiatry with the NHS. I currently live in Birmingham. I used to previously, before this role, I used to work in the crisis camps team in Birmingham for a few years. I'm particularly keen about parent training programs because we know that youths or children are basically a window to the family. So it's important that parents have the right kind of training and skills to support, their youths within that environment, which is the home environment. So I'm happy to be on the panel today. Hopefully, we can shed some more light into the topic being discussed. And it's nice to be part of it.
Thank you everyone for your intro. Now you can see, I'm speaking to the guests now who are listening to us, that we have a stellar lineup of speakers who have diverse experiences and knowledge. And so we'll invite you to send in your questions to whatever platform you're watching from, and hopefully the panel speakers will be able to address your questions at some point during the discussion. So we're going to get straight into the discussion for today. We're talking about shaping identities and nurturing minds, the intersection of racial identity and mental health of young people. I know that all over the world, there are lots of identities because identity is part of who people are. It's what gives them a sense of worth, either identity based on gender or identity based on whatever political affiliation people belong to, or identity based on even food choices, identity based on race, ethnicity. And because of what Africanness represents, we're talking about the intersection of racial identity and how that has an impact on the mental health of young people. So over to you, the panel speakers. I'll call on Dr. Buki first, and I am hoping that as we introduce this conversation, that you'll be able to shed a bit more light on identity generally and racial identity and how that impacts the mental health of young people.
Yeah, thank you, Grace. Basically, just looking at the topic or hearing it is actually a mouthful because it says racial identity and intersection. So it's really a mouthful. I don't think I can say it all without looking at my script. But I think it's really important. So basically, like she said, identity is a very big part of what we're talking about today. And I think what's important about the identity we're talking about is self-identity, what it means, how individual see and people's perception of themselves basically is what self-identity is all about. And I just wanted to start by saying that as a child or as a little child, sometimes when babies are born, I don't think immediately people get a sense of who they are because they're just little. It's very difficult to form any sort of identity. But from what we know and from evidence of past researchers, we know that children don't start to have a self-identity until about 3 to 5 years. That's when they start to recognize themselves as separate from their mothers, because initially when they're born, they think that they're both one unit, the mother and the child, because of course 9 months in, and then even when they come out, they're so dependent on this caregiver, usually the mother in many cases or somebody. So they see themselves as a unitary unit with the mother. But by the time they're 3 to 5, they begin to see that there's a difference between that caregiver and themselves. And even though it's not fully formed yet and not well developed, Eric Erickson was very kind enough to let us know that the actual self-identity starts to, even though it starts at 3 to about 5 years, you start to gain more knowledge of yourself when you're around, as an adolescent, around 12 years old, because now your personality, your persona is starting to form. You understand a little bit about your environment, because again, your identity is not just about you and how you feel. It's also, there's an expectation from whatever environment or community you are in about, what you are, what you represent. So it's adding all of those together, your perception of yourself, the perception the community sort of expects of you, and putting it together and not getting lost in all of it is what self-identity is about. And I think it's like she said, identity could be around anything. It could be around race, ethnicity, religion, and so many things. But focusing mostly on race, I think it can be sometimes it's not very clear cut, in terms of race, where your identity falls, especially because we live in a very multicultural community these days, especially using UK as an example. So sometimes there can be ambiguity for very young people about, their ethnicity, their race, their background, and their environment. And I'm hoping that we will be able to dissect this in the course of our conversation.
Okay. Rash, can you tell us the key factors, or what you think are the key factors that influence the development of racial identity in young people?
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you for that. I've actually written down the name of a book that I'm pretty fond of. So the book's called New Perspectives on Racial Identity Development. So it's a very good practical anthology. And even though it specifically charters out the stages of development in a Black identity, I personally think it's applicable to any race. So it states 5 stages of development in any kind of racial identity. So the first stage is basically naivete, where a child doesn't know any kind of identity, doesn't know what race is, doesn't have any kind of social cohesion. The next stage is acceptance. For instance, if it's a Black child, the Black child accepts what a Black person is, defined by the majority of white people or people from other race. So the Black child doesn't identify with its own race's specific qualities, but those that are defined by the society. And then they move on to the third stage, which is basically resistance. So the child says, okay, I am going to get to understand my culture more and define my identity rather than be led by something that the society has written for me. And then the fourth stage is basically reaffirming and redefining. So this is when the child actually forms a holistic racial identity. And finally, it's internalization. So here's where the racial identity kind of combines with the child's sense of self-concept. So in this stage, if a child faces any kind of racial discrimination or trauma, it can really affect the sense of identity, concept, self-concept, and racial identity. So the transition across these stages can be very traumatic and it can be very challenging. And this is applicable, I personally think, to any race. And understanding of this transition from one stage to another can actually support a child's holistic development of racial identity.
Thank you very much. The next question I was going to ask, I think I'm going to throw it to everybody because we're involved in one way or the other with young people. We support young people either as a lecturer or as somebody who works with young people in crisis, or as somebody who sees young people in the hospital, or as somebody who have to navigate alternative ways of learning of young people. So I'll just throw this out and then maybe we can answer one after the other, or however we want to do it. How do we think parents and educators can support young people in exploring and understanding their racial identity? Who wants to go first? Tunde?
I can go first.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I am looking at a more day-to-day kind of fact. So I would think, for instance, I've got friends from all different races, and one thing that they immediately tell me is, oh, the famous Indian nod. So I know that it's coming from a very benign place and that they're just being friendly and it's not necessarily a racial slur. But if a child is watching a conversation between two adults, and if a child sees that it is okay to say something like that and the other person is not reacting but just accepting the comment from the friend, the child can grow up to believe that it is okay to say anything that is race specific. So as parents, I think it's very important to be very careful about the conversations that you have around children, because they grow up mimicking our conversations, our personality. A large part of it is by modeling what parents do. So what oftentimes we think is just a joke is actually leaving an imprint on the child. So it's very important to be aware of the kind of conversations you're having around children. So that's one thing that parents could do to support a good attitude towards racial diversity in children.
Yeah. Dr. Maria, do you want to contribute to that?
Yes, of course. So in exploring and understanding racial identities, obviously, is very crucial for the personal development of children. So it's very important for parents to have open and inclusive conversations with their children. It's important to create a safe space whereby you can discuss race and identity and ethnicity with your children, and also be open to the kind of questions that they would ask without having any sort of judgment. So it's very important to ensure that your children feel safe to ask questions about their race and their ethnicities. Then it's also important for parents to expose their children to the culture, so cultural exposure. So expose your children to your culture, to your traditions, to your histories. Inform them about your family heritage. Talk to them about the traditions and histories of your heritage. I think that's very important. And in terms of education, I think it's very important in terms of the curriculum. I was part of a research in Liz Beckett University where we worked on decolonizing the curriculum, whereby we interviewed students. So students who are nurses and they've gone for like placements. So we're talking to them about their placement experiences. So experiencing racism during their placements and even like within the educational institution. And one of the issues that came up was that even down to the examples that were being given in class, sometimes students might not necessarily know the kind of symptoms to find or like to some of the symptoms to kind of identify in people from ethnic minorities. I know this is not really in relation to like children, but like I'm just giving an example of how primary education can also like try to decolonize the curriculum. I use like tertiary education to give that example, but like even in terms of like primary education, it's very important to decolonize the curriculum and bring in other examples into the curriculum that will help people or children from ethnic minorities to also feel included.
Okay, before I come to you, Dr. Vivian, can I give Dr. Tunde a platform to speak, because I understand he might be jumping off anytime soon.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you. So how can parents and educators support young individuals as they try to explore and understand racial identities? Yes, in addition to what obviously they said, now bearing in mind that these children are quite young, they're still trying to find their bearing, they're still trying to find sort of recognition, trying to recognize where they belong. And indeed, to do that successfully, I think the parents and educators are the first set of people that will look up to. So I think parents and educators are, the best position to kind of show them how to go about this. And to me, I think one of the things and one of the reasons why the young ones are really struggling when it comes to racial identity is just the fact that a lot of them have been disconnected. They're disconnected from their heritage. And if we're going to help them to identify their identity, then I think we need to start from kind of connecting them with their heritage history, providing sort of platform that will kind of give them access to their histories around their heritage. For example, as parents, one of the things we could do, definitely, introduce them to your experiences. Maybe you share your experience, your background, where you came from, and why you are where you are today. Particularly in this environment where the children are isolated. Now, I think what we need to do in that sense is to kind of share our stories with them. I mean, where we came from. And maybe once in a while you take them, for example, you come from Ghana, you come from Nigeria, wherever. Once in a while you take them, to your country. Let them have that exposure. And that will give them a sense of belonging. So if the more we do that, I think the better it will be for them. And I think the other thing we could do, just like Maria said earlier, is to kind of incorporate this into the curriculum. Decolonizing the curriculum. Yes, the curriculum obviously is white dominated, as it were. We're talking about, for example, a student who is learning physics, and everything we talk about physics, we get to talk about the white guys who have made impacts in the field of physics. That doesn't mean there has never been any black, somebody from black ethnic minority that had made significant contributions to the field of physics. So bringing that into that topic, obviously, I believe it will help. It kind of raise their confidence level that yes, we have people in this sort of background that have been able to navigate that. So then the other thing I think we could also do is to develop what I call learning communities, developing learning communities. I came across this recently. I don't know where. I think one of my WhatsApp platform where they organize this thing they call Yoruba Cultural Studies. Yoruba Cultural Studies. Obviously, Yoruba is a language in Nigeria, and so they developed that culture. And what they did was bringing their children, bringing the youth into that forum. There they learn about the art, they learn about the culture, they learn about the music, the fashions, and a lot of things that they could know about Yoruba culture. And the final thing I'm also going to say is kind of what we also call identity match mentoring module. Identity match mentoring module. Now, what we could do, be it in the education system or even as parents, yes, getting a mentor, somebody who hails from that same background, who will be able to mentor the young ones. I believe that will also be able to kind of help their confidence level. And this is one of the things I'm currently doing, bringing young ones, from the Black ethnic minority into my laboratory to see what we do, use my own personal experience to kind of help them build their confidence. And I could see transformative impact in the life of those that I've mentored so far. So the more we do that, I think, the better we'll be able to help the young ones. So I think that's what I've got for now.
Thank you so much for your in-depth contribution. That was done in a very detail-oriented manner. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Vivian.
Thank you, Grace. So I just want to pitch into this conversation, but I'm going to come from a different perspective as to how parents can, help shape their children's identity. Everyone has said, amazing things, and I'm just going to piggyback on what everyone has said. Yes, parents play a major role, especially for those of us who are in this culture where we are like the ethnic minority, where our children are seeing themselves as the other. They are the other people. The other people are majority and they are the minority. I think that first of all, the conversations, like one has said, that goes on in the home matters a lot. But then in that conversation that is going on in the home, first of all, is also how parents have accepted their heritage and how they project it in the home. Because it's not enough to say, I want to teach my child my heritage. Children are very, very, they are like sponges. They soak in everything. So you can't, on one hand, by your body language, by your conversations, even when not directed at the children, despise where you come from, and then expect that your children would be proud of that heritage. Let me give you an example. I'm from Nigeria, and if in every of my conversation I am sighing, I'm speaking against Nigeria, I'm saying, God forbid, Africa is this, Africa is that, and Africa is that, nonsense, rubbish, and all of that, there is no way you would want your children to love or to want to be associated with the heritage. Even though that conversation is not directed at them, they are listening. It's forming a perception in them to say, oh, I want to distance myself from this heritage that isn't so nice based on what they have heard or based on the conversation that is going on within the adults in their environment. So that's something that as parents, we want to pay attention to. Especially as Africans, our mode of information or passing down information has always been through storytelling and literature, right? So it's important that the stories that we tell on our dining table, in our homes, is about, is painting a picture of a beautiful heritage, so that then when we sit and we want to intentionally tell our children to embrace that heritage or to adopt or to look at where they're coming from with, acceptance, it will come naturally to them because we have planted seeds in them that we want them to be associated with such heritage, if you get what I mean. So I wanted to kind of like pitch that into what every other person has said.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your contributions. And just a little bit of a recap. I know that this is just, I'll say, just a tiny bit of our understanding around racial identity and how the racial identity of children are forming, and how parents and educators can play a part in that. And the summary of what everyone have said is, it is important to have intentional conversations about them. It's not one of those things where you just let it happen. It's going to happen organically. There's some things that would not happen organically. So you have to bring those conversations up with the young children. If you have them around you, they don't have to be your children directly, but if you have them around you, you can bring that conversation up with them. Sometimes it could be that there are parents who are not really keen about saying where their heritage is from, but if you happen to know any of that child, you can speak to them a little bit, because children are very curious, and they want to identify with something. So intentional conversations are very important. And how we have intentional conversations are that you have created a safe space, like Maria said, for your children to be able to say anything, and you talk about where you're from, because it's key that if you want to pass this to the next generation, you yourself need to have accepted or understand, or you're proud of where you're coming from. And that gives you like a very stable position from which you can then pass on that racial heritage or ethnic heritage to the next generation. And it also, I think it also involves positive examples, because, and this is, I think this is going to just go nicely into the next questions that I wanted us to talk about, which is how the society play a role, the society's perception of race, and how that impacts the young people's sense of identity. But positive examples are very important. Representation matters every time, always. And it is very fantastic what you're doing, Dr. Babatunde, to bring people of your culture, maybe, or people who look like you, to bring them to the lab. What representation does is that it shows you what is possible. Sometimes children or young people don't know what is possible. So when they see somebody who look like them, and because we're from a very multicultural society, when children see somebody who look like them, they notice, they observe it, and they highlight it. And I know we're talking from the perspective of parents or aunties or people who have young people around us, even educators as well. For those of us who are educators as well, I know that there are conversations about decolonizing the curriculum, but I was actually quite impressed at the Black History Month of last year. My daughter came home and was giving me some information that I did not know. She was talking to me about people of Black heritage and what they did during the war and what they did in the UK and several. I was blown away. I low-key pretended like I knew what she was talking about, but those were things I was hearing for the first time. And I was quite impressed that whoever taught them that had taken time to actually dig that out and show them that this is what is happening. And I remember being invited to my daughter's school once, because they if your child is getting a certificate, they will invite you to come, and maybe so that the children will feel proud and make their parents proud or something like that. And I remember that there's somebody who, I can't remember what she is, but she's got a post. It's not in the military, but she's got a post that has something to do with the royal family or something like that. But she is from a Nigerian descent. I think one of her parents is a Nigerian. And their head teacher, who I believe is Indian, made sure that she mentioned, because one of the girls in the school who won like a football tournament or something, she got a prize for football she played, stood beside that lady and took a photo. So when they were displaying it on the screen, the head teacher made sure that she mentioned that that lady that the girl was standing with is of Nigerian descent and all that. And in my head, I went, she didn't have to say that, because that woman was as Bristol as I am in Bristol as well, Rash. I don't know if you know, but that and it's gold. I'm talking about Goldie Peaches. She's something. I'll find out what she is. But I said the head teacher didn't have to say that. But I think what she did there is so that the Nigerian children who are in that assembly would know that, oh, this woman who is somebody famous in Bristol and who is somebody reputable in Bristol is from Nigeria. So I think she was just trying to highlight and represent that country, so that children who are in that school from that country see that, oh, this is somebody who have done this, I can also do that. So I think a summary of all that we've said is that we should have positive conversations, intentional conversations, and that representation matters. And this, I say, would lie or just flow straight into the next questions that I would just like to throw to everybody, and you can contribute as you are able to, or as you decide. In what ways? I know that we already know, but I think we just need to say it so that people understand that when these things are happening in the society, they know that this is what is actually happening. So I'd ask the question to say, in what ways does society's perception of race affect the sense of identity of a young person? Anyone wants to go first?
I think I mean it's talking about ways that society's perception affects young people's identity of themselves. I think we have very clear examples in how, because we already said it, that people's self-identity is not just tied to their perception of themselves, it's also tied to their society where they are, or their environment where they are. And I think it's really important, especially if you're from a minority group where you are. I think it's there's a likelihood that your voice can get drowned in the crowd, and because of that, you probably hear more of the voice of the people who are more in that society. And if you're going to hear more of their voice, sometimes they're going to talk about these minority groups in not very clear light, in not very correct light sometimes, and it may be based on stereotypes. Really, a lot of the things they're going to hear from the site is going to be based on stereotypes rather than facts. But I think what is important is that you have to give the child also needs to see clear examples where the stereotypes can be they can debate the stereotypes. They have to see clear examples where whatever stereotypes is out there by the society is not facts. They need to know facts so that they can debunk the stereotypes basically. And I know it feels like a big responsibility, especially for a young child. I mean, you're just a child. You just want to live your life, maybe play a few video games, or just go to school, maybe get an education and all. But I think that it plays too much of a big part, the society's perception of a group or of any of your identity. It's so much of a big part that it cannot be ignored, which is why people who are adults, I'm talking parents, teachers, educators, whatever, from minority groups, you have to set examples. You always have to be the example that you want your children to be. It doesn't matter what you're doing or where you're doing it. If you're setting the right examples, children are likely to learn from that, because again, they're going to mirror whatever you do, and they're going to do that. And I think I'm deviating from the question, but basically, what I'm trying to say is that the perception of the society is too important to be ignored. And a lot of the time it's based on stereotypes, and stereotypes are usually negative. I'm sorry, very rarely do you get positive stereotypes, and it could lead to discrimination and things like that. And these are things you're trying to avoid. So it's important that they can see other pictures. They're not just getting these wrong stereotypes that are not correct. They can also see facts, and they can see examples in people from their ethnicity, in people from their minority groups or from their backgrounds, that's able to debunk these stereotypes. I think that's really important, especially for young people. And I say that parents, you need to be the examples children want to see. If you are projecting a good or representing a good image of your community or of your background, the child will see that and take that on. But if you have accepted those negative stereotypes and you pass that on to your child, that's what they're going to see, that's what they're going to hear, and that's how they're going to feel about themselves. And then it becomes an argument, and then you find where there's conflict, and the parents are saying, why do you think so low of yourself? But you forget that you've brought all that negative stereotypes into your life, and you have projected that and passed that on to your child. So you need to be a good example, even sometimes when it's hard for you to believe some of the things that happens in your ethnicity. You need to learn ways, and learn facts and debunk that from myths for yourself, to get better so that you can pass better to the children. That's just basically what I wanted to say.
Before we go around the table, just based on what you're saying, I have an experience not very long time ago now with my daughter who is 7, and she came home one day and she said, "Oh, this boy in school told me that being Black is a curse." And I said, "That's ridiculous. What kind of conversations are 7-year-olds having these days? What does that mean?" And what I had to do, I didn't have to, I don't know who that boy is, I don't know what family he's coming from. And it was baffling to me because that person was equally a child. And so it automatically comes up to you that these conversations or this line or whatever it is that that child is saying, that child is probably picked up from an adult somewhere in the home or in the community or somewhere like that, because children will not sit down to make those kind of things up. And so immediately what I did was to begin to bring positive examples. And I started with her and I said, "You're a kind child. You do well in school. You do this, you do that. What does that sound like? Does that sound like a curse?" She said, "No." I mentioned the mayor of Bristol is a Black man. And I said, "Does that sound like a curse?" She said, "No." So what I did in that conversation, and not to overcomplicate it, because she's just 7, there's no point going into the nitty gritty because it has to be age appropriate as well. So what I looked for was positive examples of what that positive examples to counter the negative stereotype and whatever statement that child had made. And that was how we put that conversation to rest. So what you say is very true, because societal perception is so big a factor that it cannot be ignored. And sometimes even though children in the family, the younger they are, the more it is for them to keep the positive conversations you've had with them. But the older they get to the teenage age, where social pressure increase and they're listening to different voices, and because of their needs to fit into the group of friends or to fit into the society and to feel accepted, you know, they begin to listen to varying voices. And it might be that what you've told them and fed them with would not completely disappear, but that voice will begin to be dim. So it's something that has to be done constantly, and it's a positive conversation that has to be done constantly. It is like a constant battle, I would say. There's no end to it. Even as adults, sometimes there are stereotypes that hit you in the face, and before that time you think that, oh, you're strong enough to go past this, or this kind of thing won't affect you. But sometimes it depends on the context and situation as well. It hits you in the face in such a way that it kind of jolts you back and make you to sit down in your thoughts and things like that. So I think that plays like a really big role. Because of our time, I want us to just go straight to mental health, because it is World Mental Health Day, and that is like the core of the conversation we're having here. So I think my first question to you, Rash, would be, because you work with young people, I suppose, my first question would be, what are the mental health challenges commonly associated with racial identity in young people?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that, Grace. I don't currently work with young people, but I've researched a lot into children's mental health in the past. So based on my experience, I think racial trauma or racial identity-based discrimination comes under identity-based bullying. So anything that comes under IBB can be based on gender, or ableism, where people who are abled treat people who aren't disabled in a different way. So any kind of identity-based bullying has a drastic effect on a child's personality and identity. And if they're constantly exposed to this, it can really affect their sense of self-concept, and this can lead to psychological injury, which can sometimes slip into adulthood if it's not dealt with just then and there. So, and this can eventually mean they can go on to pass on aggressive behavior to other people as adults, and it's actually a victim targeting other victims. And there's also growing research showing that children can really go into suicidal mentality sometimes if exposed to drastic racial discrimination. So I feel like this is a topic that is not adequately researched into. It's growing in popularity, definitely, but this is an aspect of mental health that hasn't been looked into extensively. And if you do see, the body of literature that is available for this is not great. there are many, and oftentimes you'll see a bias. There's just a lot of literature on just Black communities or Asian communities, but when you see minority communities, there are quite a few different minority communities. So that way, if you see the sample population for research is not diversely represented. So this is an area that should be researched into, and when there's more research in this topic, mental health professionals can inform themselves of how to help children who are going through psychological injury caused by racial trauma.
Thank you very much for that. Dr. Buki, do you have examples or experiences you could share with us on how racial identity crisis in young people affects their mental health and well-being?
Well, I think that it's very important that we realize, especially as immigrants or immigrant parents, that we realize that sometimes immigration is a big issue for even us as adults coming into a new environment, a new culture, a new space. And for the children, it's not any different. So they're new, and sometimes, I don't know, it depends on what age they come into the country. Some come as really young, and sometimes it doesn't even matter, even if they were born here, there is that community within the house or within the family here that has some sort of cultural context. And then there's the community outside, which is school, where they're minority, isn't it? So sometimes the discord for children is trying to marry the two. So there's the fact that I'm in the UK and the culture is largely British. And there's the fact that I'm from a minority cultural ethnic group, and there's that culture as well. And sometimes there are cultural differences that conflict, or conflict sometimes. And especially as teenagers, you find that teenagers go through a lot of turmoil, trying to understand their changing body, their changing hormones, their changing self, and their sense of responsibility because they're growing into young adults. But again, in the midst of all that, sometimes there's also, what is my identity? Am I British? Because I've lived here most of my life, and I was born here. Or I don't know, am I Black? So there's that conflict, and it's not easy for them. For us, it's different. If you come in as an adult migrant, sometimes you already know you have a self-identity, you have a cultural identity, you were very likely branded in what your cultural identity is because you were already an adult before you move. You're going to have challenges, but it's not going to be the same because a young person who's coming here, there's that conflict. So I have the home front and the ethnic cultural thing, and then I have this British society, which is what I mostly know. So sometimes I say to my friends and colleagues, you're not just raising Black children, you're not just raising Nigerian children, you're raising Nigerian children within the British community, and you have to see things like that. Talking about examples, the most damaging thing that racial identity, the conflict of racial identity does to young people is their self-esteem and their self-confidence. It is really big. And when that affects an individual, it can spiral into a lot of things. We're talking mental health distress, we're talking stress, we're talking depression, we're talking no confidence, not interested in education, very vulnerable, easy target for being bullies. Once a person's self-image or self-esteem or confidence is affected, like I said, it can spiral into a lot of things. And sometimes you see young people who are very conflicted in what's acceptable at home and what's acceptable within this new community that they are in. Because again, don't forget, half the time the child spends a lot of time in school, almost 9 or 8 hours daily in school, learning. A lot of what is being learned is culturally British, if we're being honest. And I know that they're working on the curriculum, but it's culturally British in terms of what is abuse, what is neglect, and things like that. And sometimes it conflicts with what they see out here at home, which is why I say parents, I always insist that parents need to take the responsibility to unlearn, to relearn better parenting skills, because the parenting skills we've learned from our parents sometimes is not going to be enough to parent this generation, because things and circumstances are slightly different. I'm not saying the parenting skills you've learned from your parents are bad and rubbish and you need to discard them. I'm saying that you need to pick what is good here and you need to pick what is good there, and put it together, because this child is not going to have the same childhood that you have. So whatever strategies worked in your time may not necessarily work. You may probably need to improvise more, or do things differently for your child to get a better chance. So I think it's important that they have a good sense of their racial identity. You can be Black and be British. They need to know that without it affecting their self-esteem. They don't have to discard one for the other, and they need to grow into that into other. That's what makes them well acclimatized, well assimilated into environment, integrate well, and grow into a proper adults that's fully functional in the community that they are. And I think that's what's important. Don't know if that answers your question.
Yes. I think there's something that I find quite intriguing, because I think conversations about Blackness has to be brought up, because my children don't know. I'll say, so they refer to people as brown-skinned people and peach-skinned people. I don't know if it is how they've been taught in school not to, I don't know if they've been taught not to use the word Black, but so when we see different people, the conversations we have are, oh, that peach skin person or that brown skin person. And then the colorism comes into it, oh, light brown skin, dark brown skin, and darker brown, and things like that. So I think these are important conversations that we need to have, because conversations and more conversations are being had in the society, and the landscape is changing a bit. So while we're trying to navigate as parents to be able to give our children the best experience possible, the community as well is also trying to change to make sure that children from ethnic minority will also have the best chance possible and have similar chances to the other children in the environment. So I think it's for us as parents to be very proactive and to just be intentional about making sure that we have the right information to guide our children to the best that they can be. Rash?
Yes, sorry. When Dr. Bukola was talking, I just quickly got reminded of something. So she was talking about how children can be, am I British or am I Black? And I think that is such an important concept that's gaining momentum, which is being referred to as racial imposter syndrome. It's not an official diagnostic label. It's just a word to give meaning to the experience. So it's very similar to imposter syndrome, where in imposter syndrome, you can't basically attribute value to anything that is actually yours, and you feel like this is not mine. And many celebrities go through this, where you don't attribute an achievement to yourself. In racial imposter syndrome, basically, for instance, if it's an Indian child or a Black child, they imbibe and imbue themselves with so many attributes from the English culture, and at one point they're just so confused whether they're actually Black or they're actually English, because one side they're trying to conform to a peer society, they don't want to be bullied, they don't want to be pushed out, so they become another race, but when they come back home they try to become the original race. So there's a lot of confusion and anxiety, and they can also feel like, am I leaving behind my community and becoming a totally different person? Am I leaving my parents behind? Is this even really me? That can cause a lot of confusion in a little child. And if it's an adolescent, like Dr. Bukola said, they can be going through a lot already, because there are the pubescent changes and all that. And this is a conversation that children may not necessarily have with parents, because they have Google for everything. Children in those days came to parents for answers, but these days it's just a click away. So they might not necessarily bring up the conversation, and the child can go through the misery alone, which is quite dangerous. And I feel like more people should be informed of this topic, so that children's mental health is looked at along the lines of racial discrimination too.
Thank you very much for your answer. And Vivian, before I come to you, just from what we've been talking about, to lead nicely to the next question that the young people in the comment section will be asking would be, are there specific strategies or are there specific interventions that have been effective in promoting the well-being and the mental health of young people who find themselves in this kind of environment. So you're free to share personal experiences, like what Dr. Babatunde is doing with children from ethnic minorities to get them to his lab. So I think at this point, I want us to highlight for the young people who are listening to us, the specific interventions that are out there in the community that they might not know about, that they might have to go look for, that people in the healthcare sector maybe, or even people in different charities are providing to help young people who are experiencing this crisis to be able to cope. Dr. Vivian.
All right. So I actually wanted to follow up on what Rash had said about children having Google as their go-to for answers instead of parents, and bringing questions to the parents. And this is something I think that parents have to pay attention to, because it impacts on the mental health of children. I mean, I recently worked with a child who is Black Nigerian, and from my observation in conversation and everything, you could see that she had already self-diagnosed herself. So she had names, she had diagnoses for what she was feeling. She felt she had multiple personality disorder and all of that. She had read wide. I mean, there were things she was saying that I had to go back and look at, because she was just, she felt something. She felt, oh, am I going crazy? Why are they calling me this? She would go and Google. She had a lot of TikTok people she was following who were saying they were going through similar things. So this is really something that parents will want to pay attention to. And it's good what Africanness is doing, bringing awareness to these things. And, what Maria said about creating a safe space in your home where you can really have these discussions and being proactive to bring on these discussions. We're busy, we're pursuing a lot of things, but I would always say check in on your children's emotional well-being as much as and as often as you can when they come back from school. Not just how did it go today? Are you feeling all right? Ask them how they're feeling mentally, what has happened, and be that parent who is grounded, who your children can come to with this conversation, because Google can drive someone crazy. Even as an adult, is a whole barrage of information, and it can really impact on their mental health if that is where they're seeking their information from.
Just to give a quick example to buttress the point about the internet. The other day, my daughter, I think we're coming back from a bike ride or something, she said, oh, I can't remember what the question was, but the comment she made was that not everything on the internet is correct. And I was quite impressed. And I didn't know where that statement came from, but apparently she had had a previous conversation with her dad, because somewhere, somehow, it had flown into her ear that there's going to be a third world war. So I think in school they're learning about like World War I and World War II. And I think probably what's happening with, between Russia and Ukraine, people will always say, oh, there's going to be a third world war. And so I don't know what conversation, I don't know what the backstory was, but I was quite impressed for her at her age to already know that not everything on the internet is true, and sometimes there could be lies on the internet, because from there that question about, oh, is there going to be a third world war came up, and they found out that that's not true. So I think it's really key as well. A safe space is good, but also to intentionally be proactive and to just let the children know that the internet is good when it is used in the right way. Okay. Thank you everyone for your contributions. I think the recent question I asked was, are there specific strategies, or are there things that we feel are steps or interventions that can be taken to kind of promote young people who are facing these challenges? And Vivian, you mentioned a little bit about what Africanness does. Africanness, over the summer, they had like 30 days of kindness. And so it was 30 days of doing good things in the community, because yes, we want children to be good, we want them to be well behaved, but from a very young age, I think it's also important that we build into our children a sense of community. And I think that when we do this, somehow you're preparing them for leadership positions in the future, and somehow you're preparing them for greater responsibility, so that they know that it's not just about their immediate family, but that they also have a community to serve, whatever that community is. People belong to different community based on religion, based on the school community, or even the immediate community that people live in. So I think what Africanness is doing is a very good way to start doing that. And I know Mrs. Bumi had shared with me a child who wasn't very confident in their racial identity and things like that. And the child was engaged in a project that kind of showed positive examples about their heritage. And that child did that research, got involved in that project. And by the end of it, the child understood a lot more about his heritage and where he's coming from. He ended up living with a better and a positive outcome from that exercise that that child had done. So I think we can point people to Africanness, the work that Africanness do, but also in our communities as well. You know, we can do this. And I know that in the different towns where we are, I know that there's always an Indian community. I know this because if I go to the beach, I see them. They just, and I had a recent experience. It's like they come together. It's like they say, everyone, we're going to the beach today. And they come in massive number, you know? So you know that these ethnic minority groups, because people thrive in communities, they want to always go and find where their community is and to share things together and to discuss together and share similar challenges. And I think that we who have come to the understanding of racial identity, how this can affect young people, can begin to actually take these conversations to those spaces. Because sometimes people come together, for example, if there is I'll say in Bristol here, I know that they have like an Igbo community. I've never been before. I've attended their meeting once online. But I know there's an Igbo community, for example. And I know that sometimes if it's the August period, oh, we're going to eat new yam, we can take these conversations to those spaces. Because these people who are coming to eat yam, they have children at home who are going through one thing or the other, and you can bring these conversations up. And like I tell you, sometimes I feel like when we get involved in things like this, we're actually privileged to be involved in conversations where we understand what's happening in the society. There's so many parents out there who are clueless and they don't even know where to find the information from. And sometimes it's when you know what you're looking for, then you set out to go look for it. Sometimes they don't even know that these things exist. And they're more about making more money and maybe spending more money on their family because that is how they understand to show love to their family. So I think the interventions that we can have are maybe like mini projects in religious circles, in churches, in mosques, in temples, that just bring this conversation up. And because we already understand what young people are going through, kind of get them to be involved in this project as well. And that way, they would eventually have a positive and a better outcome, I'd say. Rash.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Grace. I had quite a few points. I'm going to quickly cram it all in. So I recently read an article by quite a prominent Black therapist. So he says when he was taking a walk in a predominantly white area, he came across a Black woman, and he said there was a knowing smile between him and the lady, just a knowing smile between themselves that, okay, it's good to see another Black person. And then he said this is how he transitioned into ecotherapy. It's gaining a lot of momentum where you lead walks and you lead exercises out in the community. And he says when it's culturally responsive and culture specific, for instance, a Black person leading a Black walk, an Indian person leading an Indian walk, you feel a sense of belonging and the therapeutic outcomes are better because you see a friendly face, a face that looks like you, a face that accepts you. So I feel like therapeutic alliances should be more culturally informed. And in terms of Black community, there's also this thing called battle children syndrome. So we might not be directly dealing with battle children syndrome, but people who are older in their 30s or 40s may have been children left behind by their Black parents but raised by a foster white community. So these Black children who've grown to become parents would actually carry the family trauma in their genes, and they might not recognize it often, but they will be passing the trauma on to their Black children. So again, that's something that's very important that will inform therapeutic practice. And again, another very important factor in racial therapeutic practice is trying to understand more than striving to be understood, because my grandpa used to say young children these days are in such a hurry to react that they don't respond anymore. They just react, and you're already thinking of an answer to come up with, and you're not listening to the other person. So half of the confusions about race begins when you don't listen to the other person. And the more you listen, because we're so cosmopolitan here, the more we listen, we're going to learn more about other races. So that's something that we could strive as a community, just to listen more and understand about the different races that we live with. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
I think, sorry, go on.
I was hoping that Dr. Babatunde could maybe share a little bit with us what he was doing with the young people in his lab before he leaves. I don't know if you.
Okay, yeah. So it's really been it's something I'm really passionate about because I believe we are where we are today for such a time like this, and I believe one of the ways I can make a significant impact is to kind of invest in the life of the young ones. So one of the things I'm doing currently is to get funding from, get funds from some charity or even some of the government organizations to help students, undergraduate students from Black and ethnic minority group to come to my lab to have sort of hands-on experience in the lab, engaging in some practical activities that they might not have the opportunity to kind of experience throughout their undergraduate program. So I think I've got about 3 of them now that I have students from, who came from, with Uganda's background. I have students from Nigeria. They came over here to study in the United Kingdom, and I allowed them to come and spend maybe 6 months, some of them 3 months on a placement in the lab. So some of them, yes, we pay them. Some of them, if we can't pay them, at least we ensure that they maximize that opportunity, kind of connecting them, taking them around the lab, various groups within the faculty. Yeah, so these have really been helpful, and I believe it's many of them, they've been able to gain some transferable skills, which will be beneficial for their future career. Yeah, so this is one of the things I'm really passionate about, and I'm still, if anyone is interested, feel free to get in touch, and we'll see what we can do to help.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time with us as well this evening. Before we go forward, I think I just wanted to share a story or an experience as well about how interventions could help the mental health of children, because I'll say sometimes it's a little bit complex, and sometimes these activities or these projects in the community might start out as a project in the community, but it might not start out with the intention that you're trying to help the mental health of a young person, but that would be one of the positive outcomes that will come out from that. Because through that activity, you have children getting involved in things that kind of speak to their racial identity. And at the end of the day, they have a positive outcome from whatever project. So over the summer holiday, there is a lady of Jamaican descent who she reached out to me. She had organized, I think 2 years ago or from last year, organized like a summer camp for young girls. So these young girls are meant to be between the ages of 7 to 10. And so I quickly volunteered, and I said, oh, I'll come and help you out. I'll bring my daughter as well. And I managed to sneak in the one who is 5 years old as well. And she really enjoyed it. So what she did was that on the first day of the event, they took all the girls to the University of Bristol. And currently in the University of Bristol, there's a statue of I'm actually embarrassed not to remember the full name, but Henrietta Atalex. So this is the woman from whom the HeLa cells was gotten from. So I have a PhD in biomedical science, so I have that background of doing lab work and everything like that. And I have personally used HeLa cells. HeLa cells are fantastic cells. So when you're using different types of cells, because I worked mainly with neuronal cells, and I know that sometimes when I'm not getting the results that I want from my neuronal cells, my supervisor will say, oh, go and find the HeLa cell and use it because it's a very robust cell line. Use it and do your experiment. And if it works there, then you come back and try the neuronal cell. So this was a Black woman in the US who passed away so many years ago, and her cell was harvested and it's been sold. It's made billions of dollars. Her family have not gained anything from it. Her family was not even told. Her family learned about this by mistake. Somebody just mentioned it and her family learned about it, and so many other things. So an artist in Bristol reached out to the University of Bristol and said, I want to carve a statue of this woman. And I met that artist, came to the summer camp of the children, and she was sharing her experiences with me. And she said that she had to require therapy and she had the support of people from the community for her to be able to accomplish that work that she did. And she said she experienced so much racism from the university while she was trying to carry out that work, because it feels like a situation where you're forcing people to give recognition to this thing that have blessed and helped people in the field of science, and they're reluctant to give that recognition. So she was paid very poorly for a work that she did over 12 months. She was just paid £10,000, and I found that really ridiculous. She met obstacles in every step, but she kept going because this is something she's doing for the next generation. And this summer, a group of Black girls have gone and seen that statue, and somebody is now talking to them about science. And they've seen, oh, this Black woman is a Black scientist, so it's actually very possible to be Black and to be a scientist. So that's where we're talking about representation and interventions. So it could be that one of the Black girls or one of the girls who have come for that summer camp have had self-esteem issues or have had bullying, racial bullying in school or whatever it is. It wasn't specifically said during the summer camp that, oh, we're coming here to help the mental health. But you and I know that that child is going to leave that summer camp with a positive feeling about who they are, because they've met positive examples and they've seen representations of what they can be in the future. So I think that that's one of the strategies and interventions that we can help, that can be done to promote the mental health of young people. So like we're saying around the table, so many of us are doing different things that affect the life of young people in one way or the other. And I'll just say, for the young people out there who are listening to us, get involved in these activities. When you're called upon, get involved in these activities. If somebody come and ask you to come and do an activity or a project or something that promotes your culture, or even wear a traditional dress, you should do that with your shoulders high. You should be very proud of that, and you should be happy to showcase what your culture is to the other people. I think one last question on this area of mental health before we go to talk about the voices of the young people. Dr. Buki, I'd like to ask you this question, and Maria, if you want to chip in as well, is can you just provide insights to us how self-acceptance and a strong positive racial identity can influence the mental health of young people, or just influence mental health outcomes in generally? Dr. Buki.
I think basically having a strong self-identity, racial identity, is important in making a well-grounded person. What I mean by grounded is making you like a complete holistic individual. Because what that does is that it grounds you, and when you're grounded, the likelihood that your self-confidence is going to be almost 100%. And that's what you need to push through whatever challenges, difficulties you're going to experience. Because there's no life without difficulties, isn't it? You're not going to go through life without having some challenge. That's inevitable. Nobody can protect you from that, not even your parents. It's just life. But you need that level of self-confidence to be able to build resilience enough to deal with those challenges when they come. So I cannot overemphasize how important being grounded in yourself and being self-confident, how important it is to your mental health. Because when it's not, it just leaves you vulnerable, leaves you open and vulnerable to whatever's being thrown at you. Is it bullying from school? The truth is, but working with teenagers, I know that teenagers are mean, and I say it all the time. They are very mean because when you listen sometimes to the kind of experiences people have from school, from college, and it's more difficult these days, especially with social media. It's so easy to spread lies, inaccurate facts, or no, inaccurate, not facts, inaccurate details about one young person or the other, and sometimes it's so bad that I've had situations of like a patient where it a rumor was spread in school just through a WhatsApp group, basically, and it just went very viral, went beyond the school to other schools within the environment and even within the community and almost within the country. Because I mean, it's social media. Once it's out there, sometimes there's no taking it back. Even if the initial person who posted it, changed their mind and kind of deleted it from their account, it's very easy to just go beyond. So you need to be very confident in yourself, very grounded in who you are, what your ethnicity, what it represents, rather than what the society thinks it represents, for you to lead a healthy life. Because mental health is important and it's about your functionality most of the time. Because it doesn't matter what's going on with you, if you're not functional in your daily life, are you able to do things that a young child your age should be able to do? Are you able to maximize your potential? Are you able to be useful to your community or to yourself even? So I think it's really important that you have a good sense of identity because like Rash said earlier, imposter syndrome initially used to be described, especially racial imposter syndrome, used to be described in children with mixed identity or biracial identity. Because again, because of that confusion, isn't it? Am I this or this? Am I peach or black? Am I brown or this? There's always sometimes that confusion, internal conflict, or trying to reconcile what am I exactly? And so initially they used to describe them there, but because we live in a very multicultural society these days, and there are minority groups everywhere you go in the world internationally, a lot more people are beginning to recognize imposter syndrome in themselves, even biracial people, even people with, that have parents with same race, they're beginning to experience that because it's that conflict. But if you have a very well-grounded child with good confidence, good self-esteem, good self-awareness, it doesn't really matter what people say because people would always say things. And, at the end of the day, you will be resilient enough to overcome whatever is being thrown at you as an individual. Because that's what you need for your mental health, isn't it? Because once they break down those barriers by getting to you when you're vulnerable, it's difficult to build that back up. And having said that, I want to say that even when those barriers are broken, the important thing is to seek help. Because your child, sometimes even as an adult, you can't do it yourself. Sometimes you need someone else to hold the light on the tunnel for you to see until you're able to get, to that point where you can hold the light yourself. Sometimes you need the support of another adult, and this is where help comes in. Sometimes the mental health team in school, every school has mental health support team. Sometimes it starts from there, something as little as that. And you have to encourage children to use it because I find that a lot of the children I speak to from minority groups struggle sometimes with talking to their parents about these things because they feel that they would not understand because their own upbringing and cultural perspective is very different around mental health and mental stress. So sometimes I say to them, okay, just talk to somebody. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. What matters is that you're talking to somebody that understands, is a professional. Maybe talk to them. Maybe start with talking to a stranger who you feel you're going to be easier to open up to. And then gradually the conversation can be brought in where parents are brought into the picture. Because if it's something the school mental health support, they would also be linking in with parents to kind of, feedback and give them, updates on what's going on. But I think it's important that those outlets are available if you're a leader in your community, your church, and the children can walk up to you. Every time I go to see a family that has an adolescent child, I just speak with them dining rather than with the parents, just because I want to hear what's going on. I know I'm that nosy, but sometimes I just feel like they need to be heard, even when they don't want to say so, even when they don't come to you. Sometimes I feel that their perspective needs to be heard without that brash or judgmental tone, or or brush that aside, because sometimes culturally, there's some cultures where it's difficult to appreciate mental health or treat it. And so those teenagers find it difficult to come to parents as well. So the outlet, they need an outlet, and it should be from the home. The home should be the first outlet, but sometimes that's not the situation. I'm happy for the outlet to be from somewhere else, but the important thing is that you're getting that support, from somewhere. And I think that's where it's important. If you have relationships with young people around you, I think that's helpful as well.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Dr. Maria.
Dr. Bukola has said it all. And what she has shared is actually very profound. Just to give a little contribution to what she has said, I think self-acceptance actually does foster a positive self-image and a sense of self-worth in people. So in general, when individuals or even children accept themselves for who they are and also accept their racial identity, their ethnic identity, they are actually less likely to internalize negative stereotypes. It's just like the example, Dr. Grace, that you gave about what your daughter said to you about what that child said about is it cost to be Black, and the positive reinforcement you kept on saying to your child. If another time something like that happens again, it will be less likely for her to actually internalize that negative stereotype that child will say to her. So I think it's very important for people to accept themselves. And even in general, self-acceptance actually leads to like will I say, self positive positive self-concept. So you begin to have like a positive self-concept of yourself, and it actually extends beyond racial identity. It helps an individual to see themselves holistically, and they're able to even appreciate their unique characteristics that they have. And in general, self-acceptance also leads to overall life satisfaction. So yeah, that's just my contribution regarding to self-acceptance and racial identity.
Oh, thank you very much for that contribution. To recap, just to summarize what we've all beautifully said, it is very important that children and young people have a very strong sense of themselves. They have a very strong identity in themselves. And beyond whatever the society or beyond negative stereotypes that are out there, it's very important that they have a very strong concept of themselves. And it is our responsibility as the adult around them or as their parents, like Dr. Buki said, it doesn't have to be your own child directly. It could be a young child in your environment. It could be a young child who maybe you're an auntie to, or it could just be a young child that you come across from time to time. Children also need to be heard as well. And it gives them a strong sense of a self, that they are worthy of being heard, because sometimes they come from environments where they're not heard and nobody wants to hear what they have to say. So as adults, I'll say, or as the people who understand a lot better, I think they say it takes a little spoons of water or little drops of water to make a mighty ocean. So I think from this group of beautiful ladies, we can start to spread, that positivity out there to the young people that we see around us, and also to even talk to parents about it, because I always say that our parents have done the best that they could do with the information that they had at that time. So it is now up to us to seek superior information, to seek superior knowledge, and to do better. We cannot do exactly what our parents have done, or we cannot even do worse, because there are people who are doing worse, believe it. There are people who are doing worse, but because we have better knowledge, because we have better understanding, we're exposed to some of these things really early on in life, and we understand some of these concepts that maybe to the older generation, are things that are not talked about, mental health and how that affects people or different things. You might come from communities where they just term every mental health illness madness. You're just mad, and nobody wants to be associated with madness. So when people are suffering, they shy away from it. They don't ask for help. They don't even understand what's happening to them, so they hide it, and these things become complex, and they just internalize all that pain, and sometimes it comes out or it is expressed in really negative ways. So thank you everyone for your contribution. The next question I wanted to ask, I think we're running out of time, and we'll quickly wrap up so that we can get some very beautiful lying this weekend. I think it's about the youth. So all the conversations we've been having are about young people, about young children, and about letting them know that there's a safe space where they can speak to an adult or somebody that they trust. But I want to ask questions of everyone now. What you think are more proactive steps, or what advice you will give to young people to encourage them, or young people who want to make a difference? Because there are young people who, as they're growing up now, they're getting more information, or maybe they're coming from families where they've been listened to, they've been encouraged to get involved in things in the community. If you have that young person listening in on the call now who is asking a question to say, oh, how can I improve my self-confidence? How can I improve my self-esteem? How can I even get involved out there? Because believe you me, sometimes when young people are struggling with things, if you get them to go out there and help in a project that tackles whatever it is they're struggling with, they end up coming out with more positive outcome. So what suggestion would you give, or what advice would you give to a young person who is trying to make a difference and who is trying to have better mental health? Dr. Vivian, should we start from you?
Well, I would say accept yourself for who you are. And we all struggle, because I think that young people, because of the way our society operates and because of the way adults relate with young people, there is that struggle to really beat themselves up when they fall short, when they feel like they're falling short, or when they're making mistakes. So if a young person is listening in, I want them to understand that nobody is perfect. We all struggle, and it is very, very normal. And one of the ways to help when you're struggling is ask for help, right? To go to trusted adults, people you can speak to, and ask for the help. And seek out mentors. You can speak to your parents, that's fine. If you can ask your parents to get you mentors, because as a parent, you may not be your child's mentor in everything. Like I tell people, as a parent, you need 3 categories of people around you and around your child: people who are ahead of you, people who are your peers, and people who are coming after you. Because, for instance, if I'm parenting it, there are things that this might be looking at me like, oh, mom is old school. But if I have a teenager who is like a mentor to me, whom I can direct my child to say, okay, speak to auntie this person about this particular thing, they might listen more to that person because that person is a younger person, and they might see that person to understand the situation more, right? So explore mentoring, right? Be open to have that conversation with trusted adults. And for those who want to contribute or to a change or feel to share, I would say don't have to share. There is in the journey of making a change or putting yourself out there, there's that fear that you need to be perfect, right? You can also share from a place of your struggle to say, this is what I am struggling with, this is how I am navigating, this is support system that I have. It might help another young person out there who is struggling to see that, well, I'm not the only person going through this, and if this person is navigating it this way, then maybe I can navigate my challenges in a similar way. But when it comes to young people, mental health and identity, I just think that, just like as we have been saying and reiterating, I just think that parents are the center of it all, right? I think that for a young person, A young person might not be very, very confident to be out there to make a change. A young person might not be very out there to actually recognize what they need to do. So it's also up to the parent to prompt, to nudge their children to say, engage in project. You know, have you spoken to this person after a meeting with this person, you know, for you to speak or this idea or this initiative and all of that. So parents essentially really need to pay attention to the child in front of them and, you know, how to support them and nudge them, you know, to projects that might be supportive of their mental health, and, you know, their giftings as well. One of the things that can also boost a child's confidence and esteem is also that acknowledgement of their gifts and, you know, what they are good at. You know, pay attention to what your children are really, really good at, and, you know, help them to explore those gifts, because the more they explore, the more they understand that they're really good at something, and then the more they can use that gift to bless their communities as well. So that's what I'll say about that.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Rash, do you have any practical, actionable steps that young people can get involved in to help promote their mental health and just to, you know, create positivity in the spaces where they find themselves?
Of course, yeah. I think Dr. Vivian has covered most of it, but I could just build on that and say, I think peer learning is of great importance, because even in substance misuse, you have someone who's a sponsor and you find this person relying on the sponsor more than even your own therapist. So like Dr. Vivian said, if it comes from a friend, they're more likely to internalize and take it into thought, because they would think, okay, this person gets me because this person's the same age as I am, while my parent is old, my parent is old school, doesn't get me. So the level of resonance is higher with a peer. And also I see that there is a slight increase in focus groups that are happening, especially around trauma from racial discrimination. And again, groups are a very, very helpful standpoint for young people, because you meet other people who've been there, done that, gone through the same trauma, but emerged with absolute resilience. So you're learning from someone who's actually been through the whole journey. And again, it helps them a lot more than just a therapist or just a parent talking to them. And especially this is tricky because they are young and they're bound to try and rebel. They're bound to try and find out things on their own rather than just listen to parents exclusively. So it would be really good to explore groups in a local area. There are groups on Facebooks where they put out times where people meet for coffee or tea and have an informal chat about these kinds of things in a safe space, again, of course. And it's usually conducted by a facilitator who's trained in this. So parents can do some veracity checks to see if these are safe spaces and then send their children to that. So yeah, that's what I would like to add to what Dr. Vivian already said.
Thank you very much. Dr. Maria, I know that you mentioned something about policy changes as regards to curriculum. Do you think there are specific policy changes or maybe like systemic reforms that you feel would promote? I know some of the time, some of these things are outside our control, or some of these things are conversations that have been had, but it feels like the outcomes are coming out a lot slower than we anticipate, or that the speed at which the outcome is coming up is not as quick as the effects that we're seeing of the negative impact of a racial identity crisis on the young people. So just to touch a little bit on that, because you had mentioned it before, are there like systemic changes you think that could happen that would promote the well-being and mental health of young people?
Yes, totally. I believe that there are certain systemic changes that, if it actually occurs, it would definitely impact the well-being of young people. And as you've said, sometimes these things are very slow, and sometimes, like, even when some of these things are being pointed out, it might just be that there's not enough research to like fully ensure that these changes actually occur. So I think it's more about more people like participating in research in terms of like bringing ensuring that this change actually occurs. So I know that like some organizations are very like intentional about diversity and inclusion, And that was one of the reasons as to why we went into the research in Leeds Beckett University, because they were looking at how to improve the placement experiences of students from ethnic minorities. And as a result of that research, they did actually sort of looked into the curriculum and tried to change some of these things. So I believe that with more research, it can actually promote changes. It can bring about certain systemic changes, which would actually improve and impact the mental health of young people.
Thank you very much for your contribution. I just want to make a comment before I would ask Dr. Vivian to come in, because she's worked somehow directly with this. I know the research team for Africanness, we were approached recently by COMIC. So COMIC is a child-oriented mental health institute something, sorry. But COMIC is a research team in the Yorkshire and Leeds area, and that research team, they're within the NHS, but they're a research team that are mainly focused on children and different issues that impact the mental health of children, around autism, around ADHD, around just different physical activities that could help the mental health of children. And so they saw the good work that Africanness was doing, and they approached us because every time all around the UK, conversations are had about how to diversify data from research, how to include people of more ethnic minority in research. COVID, the pandemic have kind of shed a light to see that, oh, people from ethnic minority groups had worse health outcomes from COVID and things like that. And so there was the impact of socioeconomics, there was also the impact of race, there was also the impact of health inequalities and things like that. And there was also the impact of people not even being aware of the information that is out there or where to seek for help from. And so lots of these things are conversations that are being had. Some organizations are sincere and they genuinely want change. Some organizations are doing them as tick box exercises. Whatever the outcome or whatever the intentions of organizations are, I think that they are very important. And I think that when collaborations come our way and when collaborations come to our doorstep, we should embrace them, because until research data is diverse enough to be able to capture everybody, you will not be able to proffer any solution. And in different minority ethnic groups, it could be as basic as starting awareness groups, or as basic as even creating events or activities where you're trying to educate people. And it might sound ridiculous because you feel like in the mainstream British society, people already know about this. But these are ethnic minority groups who, based on sometimes religion or based on one cultural difference or the other, some conversations are taboo. And it's just only recently people are opening themselves up to begin to have some conversations. So it could be basic to the normal ear that is listening, but it could be that a topic such as autism or ADHD or mental health issue in young people are things that awareness needs to be created around. And so, Dr. Vivian, I would like you to share a bit more light on this, because I know that you've recently done a research with parents of young people.
Yeah, recently I research and that research was around the barriers to accessing autism diagnosis here in the UK for Black parents of autistics. And it was quite, just like you have said, it was quite, very, very insightful in the sense that, like you said, we're in UK, so you would think that the information is out there. You would think that people are very informed about autism. I think autism is like mainstream in the last couple of years to, there's been a lot of awareness, but apparently in the especially, there's still a gap in education, in awareness, and in approach as to, what parents know about autism. Because from the research, we found that a lot of parents were not aware of what autism is. And even the people who were aware of what autism is had misconceptions about what it actually is. I had parents in the research during the interviews who were saying things, autism, had to come with physical disabilities. So when they heard about autism, the picture or the, they would think is that the child have to have physical disabilities. So these parents had their children showing early signs of autism or showing classic signs of autism, but they couldn't associate or marry the two because they were thinking that, you know, it had to come with some physical disability. So they went round and round and round, you know, doing other things to get help for the child and not actually seeking the appropriate help that they needed. And who said, okay, I now know that my child has autism, but what do I do? Where do I go? How do I start? Because the pathway to accessing, you know, diagnosis for autism is not really clearly stated. For sometimes it has to come from the school, you know, sometimes it has to come from the local authority, for sometimes it has to come from the GPs, rarely from the GPs. So these parents are visiting the GPs, but nothing much, quote and unquote, is being done for them. So they're wondering, so how do I get the help that my child needs, right? So they go round in circle, they're sent to different places before they can now, you know, actually find a pathway that, you know, that to getting diagnosis for their children. And then you want to eventually get the diagnosis or who gets into that process. But it's a struggle because there are a lot of things that are given to you. There are a lot of supports that are available on paper, but if you don't know, right? So nobody comes to educate you to say, okay, now that you're in this process, this is what to do, this is what to do, these are the supports available, this is what you get as benefits or to support your child or to help your child. You have to seek those information by yourself. And for parents, from the research, what they said that even when you have that information, it's almost like you're fighting to have those information, to have those supports, you know, given to you or to you, as the case may be. So it was, and then we had that, you know, there's this cultural or thing in the Black community where, you know, there's lack of trust for the system or, you know, for the motives, right? So that was highlighted a lot where, you know, there's the opinion that, oh, they're sending us to go get an assessment because they want to access funding for disability based on the number of children that are disabled. You know, there was that conversation, that lack of trust, that you know, lack of trust for the system or for the services. So these are things that we need to address as a community. I think that in when it comes to disability, when it comes to learning disability, when it comes to mental health, there is a huge information gap in the ethnic minority community at the growing research around. And like you said, there isn't enough data when it comes to the Black and ethnic minority groups. So there's more research needed, obviously, but there's also education and to say this is what is going on, these are the symptoms, this is what to look out for, this is the pathway to getting help, these are the support services that are available, and this is how to access them. And you know, we can have that conversation and get our community more informed so that they, especially for children, their parents can appropriately support their children who need the support.
Thank you very much. I would want to wrap this conversation down, otherwise we're going to be here speaking for a very long time. So thank you everyone for your contributions. I just want, in like 1 minute, if we can go around the table and give like final words of our take home or our final advice. I'll say, from, we've talked about a lot of things around the concept of racial identity, the concept of self-acceptance, the concept of mental health in young children or in young people, how young people can be involved in some of these activities and projects that have positive outcomes. So I'd just like us to go around the table. I'll start from Rash. In 1 minute, if you have like final words for our listeners.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think more organizations like Africanness need to start developing, because I think the kind of work that Africanness does is very important. So more such organizations need to come about so that more people can be helped. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Vivian?
Okay, so what I'll say to I believe that many people listening to us are parents. So what I'll say is the society isn't just a void space. The society is made up of people and individuals that we encounter, our children encounter every day. And the conversation is constantly conditioning our children to act, to behave, to, to adopt identities. And it's a matter of whose voice is louder in our children's, hearts or their inner dialogue. So as a parent, I think that we should step up with having conversations and neutralizing whatever negative influences that the society is having on our children on a daily basis or as often as we can, so that in their internal dialogues that our voices are louder, those positive and affirmative voices that we speak into them, that gives them a positive identity and acceptance is louder than what they encounter out there.
Amazing. Thank you for your final word. Dr. Buki, please. Have you got a final word for us? You're mute. I think you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what I'd just like to say is this. A lot has been said about today to young people and to parents. I would want to leave with this note that be the example you want to see in your child as a parent. Be that example in leading, in volunteering, in relearning and unlearning skills. And also for the young people, be an example of what you want to see of your background in the community. So because when you're an example of what you want to see from people of your ethnicity or background, you are challenging the stereotypes that's been perpetrated by people in the community. So also be out there, be like a medium to showcase a better be a better representation of your community as well as a young person. So parents have their work cut out for them, but even as young people growing up and trying to find yourself, be a good representation of your community as well. And we can't overemphasize the importance of research and organizations like Afrikindness as well in supporting young people. But be an example as a parent and as a young person. Be out there, represent, volunteer, be an example. Those are my final words.
Thank you for your final words, Maria.
Okay, yeah. So I think my final words will still be around in terms of more in-depth research needs to be carried out that can help drive the systemic change that needs to occur, and that can also bring about policies that would impact the mental health of young people. And it's also important for young people and their families and caregivers to also explore some of these organizations such as Afrikindness, AFB. We have so many organizations that actually provide support to young people in terms of helping them to navigate their racial identities. So it's very important for families to explore these opportunities. And also community organizations and schools can also come together to collaborate and bring about a comprehensive network in terms of helping to support young people that are facing racial identity challenges.
Thank you so much for your final word. We've heard so much, and thank you. I'll say a very, very big thank you to the panel speakers. It's definitely been a very insightful and informative session today. Thank you so much to our panel speakers. I mean, you've taken your time to come and talk to us from your personal experiences, from your experiences at work, from your experiences with other young people, and it is well appreciated. And thank you for the final word to the young people who are listening to us. Before we go, I'd just like to bring to our awareness the Africa Awareness Week. So we know that in the UK, every October is Black History Month, and there's lots of activities around Black History Month where children are taught about things and contributions that people from ethnic minority groups have made to the world of, be it science or art or music or whatever it is. And to support that and to contribute to that, Afrikindness is currently hosting Africa Awareness Week. So hopefully I might be able to share the website. So the website is Afrikindness, just africaawarenessweek.co.uk. So this is what the website looks like. And if you come here, you'll find lots of activities. There are activities that are targeted at parents. There are other activities that are targeted at schools. There are also activities that are targeted at organizations as well. There are dress-up days, children at home park. There is cultural dances, art exhibition. I know that there are videos around about different places and different locations about Africa. There are quizzes, games, there are prizes to be won, and there are so many things that are part of the Africa Awareness Week. So I'll encourage our listeners to just go to the website and see how you can participate. There is definitely something that you can participate in. And I also encourage our parents as well to share this link to the schools. I know that the schools, different schools have their email addresses. You can just share the link to the schools, write them an email and say, oh, ahead of the Black History Month, these are a list of activities that I think your school would benefit from. If they can go through it and see, maybe it could be like webinars for their teachers or just resources that they can use to have activities with the children in school and things like that. So it's not too late. It is currently ongoing, and there are so many activities. There will be webinars from the parents team. There will be different talks to organizations. There will be trainings to organizations. So apart from the week where these activities are concentrated, throughout the months, there are different activities that are going on. So I'll encourage our listeners to visit the website. Remember that I said that there are prizes to be won, so do not be left out. You visit the website and see how you can get involved. So just before we close, I'll just once again want to say a very big thank you to our wonderful audience for sending in their questions, and also thank you for the esteemed panel speakers for the brilliant and it's been a very engaging session. And I know that we have made contributions, we've spoken about our experiences, but I know that we're also living with thoughts and things that we're going to sleep over and things that, you know, will build up from this conversation in the future. Be it a research question that have popped into your head, or be it something that you say, oh, that is an area that there's not much data, so we need to explore that and, you know, try and find out more information about that. So I want to say a very big thank you. Afrikindness is there, you know, to talk about these topics that we've talked about, or to give you pointers, or to even point you to help that you can find in your community. So if anybody wants help and you're struggling, you can email the parents team. It's parents@afrikindness.com, or you can even email the research team, research@afrikindness.com, or you can go to the website. If you go to Afrikindness website, you find an email that you can email somebody and we'll be able to give you help. It doesn't matter where we are. We're all in different parts of the UK, but we're able to navigate, you know, point you to the right direction of where to find help and where to get the help that you need. So thank you very much. Let's not forget to connect with each other, and let's not forget to take back home that we should be the example that we want to see in our children. We should live our best life so that our children will learn from us as well. Thank you everyone for your time, and have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye.